So my Yelp story starts out like this. I think it was sometime around 2013, mid 2013, maybe 2014, possibly. I had went, at least 3 or 4 years without ever even considering making a Yelp page. I actually didn't even know I had a Yelp page until when I finally, somebody mentioned that it would be helpful if I did. When I went to make a Yelp page, it turns out I already had one. And the reason that I had one was that a customer that I had a bad experience with, I've dealt with hundreds of people, hundreds of happy customers. And then one guy gets pissed off, who still owes me like 2 grand, by the way. Um, he created a Yelp page for me and just left a bad review. So the whole time I don't even know I have a Yelp page, and there's a Yelp page sitting there with, and its sole review is negative, and he writes this big long paragraph. Most of it is bullshit. But apparently it's somehow legal to create a Yelp page for a business without them knowing and just lie. You know what I mean? So, for example, your favorite, say you own a breakfast cafe. Some asshole goes in there and gets pissed off because there's too few blueberries in his blueberry muffin, and he goes on, makes you a Yelp business page. You could have been in business for 50 years. It doesn't even matter. You've been in business 50 years, never even cared or knew about Yelp. This guy can go create a Yelp page for you and then just be like, oh, this guy, skull fucked my mother in a parking lot, and there's nothing you can do about it. So when I finally realized that I had a Yelp page, when I went to create it, it asks, it's basically like, well, you already have one. To claim it, do this and this and this, provide this information to confirm that you are who you are, the business owner. And I was like, oh, that's fucking weird. And so I called them, and when they finally got back to me, they basically told me that there's nothing they can do. Even though the business page was created without my knowledge, and then that negative review, that is half of it was lies anyway, was just sitting there the whole time. And I'm like, okay, so you could just create a page for somebody and just lie on it and say whatever you want, and there's nothing you can do. He's like, well, no, there's nothing we can do about it. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, so there's zero you can do about somebody making your business page and leaving a flat out lie on it. He's like, well, no, there's nothing you can do. I'm like, we went back and forth for a while, and finally I got frustrated and I gave up on it. And I'm like, well, if there's nothing you can do, then fuck it. I'll just, and I was going to hang up on him, and he's like, well, if you wanted to buy advertisements, maybe we could do something. I'm like, okay, so it was such bullshit. I was fucking, I haven't been so pissed in my life. And he's like, and I'm like, so there's nothing you can do unless I pay for some sort of advertisement or whatever, or use my, basically whore out my page, then there might be something you can do. And he's like, yep. And I'm like, this is exciting. It's not like extortion. It's not similar to extortion. That is extortion. That's the very definition of extortion, is using some sort of leverage to extract money or whatever from somebody, information, whatever. I don't know the exact definition, but that is extortion in my mind, which is illegal. Now, I don't know how the fuck they're able to pull this stuff off, but it turns out that it's a really big problem. Any other business owners that have dealt with this know what I'm talking about. They oh, and another thing too is they kept sending me emails like harassing me, saying, you should do this or this or this, and whatever, or we'll do this. And I'm like, it got out of control. And so I went and I let my customers know. All I did was let them know. I'm like, hey, I sent out a mass email to my customers just letting them know, because who knows how many people had seen that negative review. Like people, and it turns out like you can go, on your web, on your when you're, your home dashboard settings, like on Yelp, you can see the numbers, and it turns out like a lot of people, there had been a lot of traffic through there. A lot of people, like whether they, got my business card from somewhere and they're like, oh, well, let me see what he looks like on Yelp. And it turns out there's hundreds of people that went on there and all they saw was that one review. That is so fucking frustrating to me. I mean, hundreds of people, hundreds of satisfied customers, and then one asshole goes on there and, pulls my name through the mud. So once I realized that, I told my customers that I was like, hey, I'm kind of in a bind here. I was gonna make a Yelp page, but it turns out I already had one that had a negative review on it, and that's all that anybody's seen so far. So, and I didn't tell them, I didn't say, hey, go there and talk me up or anything. I'm just like, hey, go on there and tell, just leave an honest review, and they went on there and they left reviews, and now they. Yelp, after I apologize, I haven't told this story before, so it's all over the place, but and some of this stuff I'm just remembering, but they blocked the reviews. They blocked a bunch of the reviews, and then when I called them, I'm like, what gives, and they're like, oh, well, you're soliciting reviews. And I'm like, no, I'm not soliciting. I just let them know that I even had a Yelp page. Like, they didn't know, I didn't even know. So now that they do know, they're going to go on there and leave me a positive review, but based on some shitty algorithm that they have, if there's enough reviews in a concentrated period of time, they get blocked, and they're like on this other page. If you go to Yelp page, I'm not going to say my business name on here because this is on my YouTube channel, but if you go to my business page, or I'm sure others, there's the reviews that you see. And then there's like these other hidden reviews with like some tiny little link that says, these other reviews that aren't recommended. And half of my reviews are on there, So when all of the reviews were within a short amount of time, I was like, I have no reason to lie. I told them, all I did was simply let people know that I have a Yelp page. Even though it was created without my knowledge, when I did go to create it, all I was doing was confirming that I was the business owner, and then, finding out that there was just that negative review sitting there the whole time. So, I let my customers know. They did me a solid and went through and left me a bunch of positive reviews, which I was so grateful for. But then they blocked them, and I talked to the guy, and that's when he's like, we have this algorithm. We can change the algorithm, to more in your favor if you, once again, buy advertise or let us advertise or pay for, I forget what the deal was, but somehow they wanted money from me. And I guess to buy sponsors or something like that are probably paying them. I don't really know how it works, but point being, they were trying to extract money from me. And I still don't know how this is legal, but there's a movie coming out soon. But it's called $1 Billion Bully, and it's an expose documentary on just this and how they've extorted so many people and just harassed people. And like, I'm sure there's stories. I mean, I watched the trailer, and there's a lot of stories that are worse than mine. So then comes this particularly bad customer. It's actually the ex-wife of a known conspiracy theory radio guy around here. I don't need to say his name. You can do the math. But it's his ex-wife. They were going through a divorce at the time, and so she's trying, the whole time I'm doing work for her, they have this giant, like, it was like 150,000 gallon pool. It was like the most badass pool I've ever seen, which says a lot. I've been in the business for a while. And she, by the way, she still owes me $3,000. She goes on there and just tells all these crazy lies. She was probably pilled out. I don't know what she was doing. She was trying to pay her bills with alimony money. Like, she was waiting on an alimony settlement, and so she's, every time she would get an invoice, she'd be like, yeah. Well, wait, I got some money coming in, and don't worry, I'll get you back. And like, at a certain point, I'm like, no, like, if you can't pay your bills, you don't get the service. And that's. Just on a side note, I don't do business anymore just because of all the bad experiences that I've had. I don't do business with divorced housewives. somebody like she got the house, she got this big settlement, she got the pool and all that stuff, the awesome lifestyle without having to work for it. And the weird thing about housewives is they don't, a lot of times it seems like they don't understand what a transaction is. Like they don't understand exchanging exchanging money for services. They don't understand what a business transaction is because they're used to everything just being paid for. They're not used to having to work for it. And so this customer was a nightmare. Still to this day, probably the worst customer that I've ever had. And she goes on there, tells all these crazy, outlandish fucking stories about me cursing out somebody. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I've had my fair share of run-ins. They were all justified in my opinion, but never once did I ever curse at her. Never once did we really ever have any sort of argument. We didn't even talk that much. She was never there. We talked through text, and I guess she could sense my frustration. So I just kind of stopped doing business with her. And like I said, she had racked up a $3,000 bill. So she one of the things that she says that, it was actually kind of funny. She says that her security cameras show me just like sabotaging her pool equipment, which in my mind, I'm picturing me, laughing maniacally and like turning valves, just aggressively, and like springs flying out and shit going haywire, red lights beeping, and which obviously didn't happen. I knew that never happened, and I'm like, good. I called her bluff. I'm like, good, bitch, fucking, call it. She said she was gonna call the cops, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, call the cops, go ahead. I knew that she was obviously lying, but once again, when I spoke with the Yelp people, they said there's nothing we can do about this, even though it's a lie. You're claiming it's a lie. There's nothing we can do about it unless you pay us for this, that, or the other thing. And so I just wanted to go on record and state, or tell my story and be sure that people know these people are hacks. You got to understand, just human nature is, people are only going to leave feedback, generally speaking. Not everybody. I know those the Yelp elites out there that do a bunch of reviews one way or the other, but most people in general are not compelled enough to leave any sort of feedback or any documented feedback unless it's a negative experience. Like, people expect things to go well. Like, if you go somewhere, the food is good, that's what you expected. You're not compelled enough to go leave feedback about how superb your experience was. And that's just human psychology. That's just human nature. And that's the reason that Yelp is a flawed system, or it's a flawed business plan, or whatever you want to call it. Like, whatever they have going on there, it's flawed because I would have, if people like I said, felt strongly enough to go leave feedback or whatever, I would have like thousands of positive reviews and then 5 or 6 negative ones. But there needs to be some sort of checks and balances where some these stories need to be verified somehow. I mean, if they go on there and the guy could just be like, oh yeah, he tried to finger pop my little sister in an alley, and I'm like, so that's just gonna be sitting there, and it makes no sense to me. I don't know how the fuck it's legal. Well, actually, I have an idea how it's legal. I think that they probably, at this point, are probably collecting money from a bunch of different advertisements or advertisers, different companies or whatever, that want to get, their banner or whatever on their page. So they're just like the movie's called that's coming out. It's called $1 Billion Bully. They're a $1 billion company, so they can afford all kinds of litigation. So anytime somebody's, wants to come at them, they're like, yeah, we're just gonna, yeah, come at me, bitch. I got fucking Johnny Cochran on the case. He's dead, obviously, but they just have a team of lawyers that are willing to basically bully you out of any sort of litigious situation. So I don't know how that shit is legal. I know that there's a lot of people that have had similar experiences and worse. But like I said, I just wanted to tell my story and just throw it onto the pile along with everybody else's, so that hopefully we can bring down these fucking assholes. They're hacks. They do nothing. It'd be one thing if they... I really don't know, actually. I was trying to think of a way that it could work, but I really don't know that there is a way for there to be a non-biased, like neutral approach to leaving reviews for something. There's always going to be some sort of conflict of interest as far as that stuff goes, because there's a lot of assholes out there, and I'm a firm believer that most people are good. Most people are good people out there. Most people just are nice and friendly, and they just they just want everything to go smoothly. But those aren't the people that are leaving the reviews. The people that are leaving the reviews are people that they're just super negative. There's some sort of axe to grind, and it's just unfair. I mean, I know life isn't fair, but this is bullshit, and it has a direct effect on people's business and income. I mean, luckily a lot of my business is referral based, so I don't really have to worry too much about my Yelp reputation. But I mean, if I did, and I know there's a lot of companies out there that do, it would be very damaging to business and finances and stuff like that. So fuck Yelp. They're a bunch of fucking hacks. I hope they see this video. There's no way that this can go on forever. I know that they've built up a fan base, or whatever you want to call it, but quote me on this, that shit will crumble. That empire will crumble. And hopefully this, hopefully this helps get to that point. And also, if there's I would like to see a Yelp for Yelp. So anybody out there, if you're some sort of a tech savvy guy or whatever, I would like to make that and see what they had to say about it, because most of Yelp's reviews would most likely be negative, and then the tables would turn and we'd see what the fuck they'd have to say about it. Anyway, thanks.